Hey friends, this is Jen and welcome back to my channel. And before we get started on this case, if you haven't already, please make sure to click the like and subscribe button so that you don't miss out on any of my new videos. So this week we're going to be uncovering the tragic murder of a Brazilian soap opera star whose name is Daniella Perez. And just as a side note, there are quite a few names of people, places, and things that I might not have the best pronunciation for, so if that is the case, then I do apologize in advance, and please feel free to correct me in the comments, and I hope you guys bear with me. So Daniella was a really famous actress and dancer whose career was really beginning to take off in the late 80s to early 90s. But unfortunately in 1992, Daniella would have her career and her life cut short by a very angry co-worker and his wife due to a number of reasons that involved envy, jealousy, just a very frustrated work situation. A lot of very bizarre reasons that shouldn't have been any cause for murder. Before we get into the details of the actual crime, I want to give you guys a little bit of a backstory on Daniella so that you guys are a little bit more familiar with who she is and where she came from. Daniella was born on August 11th in 1970 in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Her mother was the famous telenovela writer Gloria Perez, and her dad was an engineer named Luis Perez. Gloria and Luis were married up until 1984, at which point they did decide to go their separate ways. The marriage wasn't working anymore, so they did get divorced. But before getting divorced, they did go on to have 2 more children, so Daniella ended up being the eldest to 2 younger brothers. Daniella was described to be a very creative and very passionate individual. She actually started developing a very strong interest in the arts at a very early age. She first started taking an interest in dancing at the age of 5, and then as she progressed into her teenage years, she would start dancing professionally with a dance studio in Rio de Janeiro city. She eventually started moving into television and of course started very small, very minor character roles. And this was not surprising because don't forget her mother is a telenovela writer, and this means she likely has a lot of really strong connections with producers, other writers, and a lot of different television networks. Daniella's first role in television would be as a tango dancer in the Reed Manchetti novella called the Cananga do Rapau. And her dance group was also invited by a television network called Reed Globo, currently known as TV Globo, to act for one of their novellas called Barriga de Aluguel, which was written by Daniella's mother. Daniella had auditioned for the novella and she ended up getting the role of a character named Chloe, who was a dancer in the fictional club. The character that Daniella had landed was actually meant to be like a very minor character, but due to the good reception that she received from the audience, she ended up getting a lot more screen time because of her talent and her charisma. So she was very passionate about both dancing and acting, and she didn't really just rely on her mother's connections. I mean, obviously the connections helped, but I think she did put in quite a lot of effort and work into becoming a professional, and that was really recognized by a lot of different producers and TV networks, and that would really help to kick off her career. Eventually, Daniella's acting skills caught the attention of a director named Dennis Carvalho. Dennis would invite Daniella to take on a part on his show called O Dono do Mundo. She would actually take on the part of a girl named Yara, who was the main character's sister. After this period, Daniella would go on to land a number of different roles in different television programs, and she would even end up meeting her husband on set. His name was Raul Gazzola, and they would end up marrying in 1992. Daniella's career really began to take off around this time, especially after she was casted in her mother's novella. This novella was super popular in Brazil, so it actually gained her the nickname of Brazil's sweetheart. Unfortunately, at the height of Daniella's career in 1992, this is also when things start to take a really deadly turn for her. On the night of December 28th in 1992, Daniella, who was 22 years old at this time. 22-year-old Daniella was ambushed and stabbed a total of 18 times in the neck, lungs, and heart. And obviously when you're stabbed that many times in such vital organs, it's very unlikely that you're gonna survive that. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Her wounds were so severe that she ended up not making it through the attack. And the very next day, when news of Daniella's murder broke, it honestly shocked the entire country. Because don't forget, she was Brazil's sweetheart. Around the same time that Daniella had been murdered, there was breaking news involving the impeachment of the Brazilian president. But when news broke of Daniella's murder, this piece of news about Daniella's death actually outshined the breaking news of the president's impeachment. That's how popular Daniella was in Brazil. Now, what really shocked people when it came to Daniella's murder was the fact that her colleague, her friend, and her on-screen love interest, Guilherme de Padua, was named as the main suspect in her murder. Although both Daniella and Guilherme were married, not to each other, but to different people, there were some reports that the two of them were having an affair with each other. However, I just want to say that this affair has not been confirmed. A lot of people actually believe that there was no affair and that Guilherme completely made this up. So just keep that in mind. Guilherme did actually tell his wife Paula that he was having an affair with Daniella and that he had basically just slept with Daniella because she was the show author's daughter, and that doing so would probably help him professionally. But things got really tricky during the show because Guilherme was becoming really unhappy about the fact that he was getting a lot less screen time. He had been cut from a few scenes just a few weeks prior to Daniella's murder, and that made him become increasingly worried about the fact that he could either end up getting more reduced screen time or just written off the show entirely. So this leads him to basically start harassing Daniella, trying to get her to speak to her mom about getting him more time on screen. And she's basically like, I can't really help you with that. Like, that's not in my power to help you, and I'm not gonna speak to my mom about it for you. I've even read in some articles that Daniella's mom, Gloria, even stated that she had no power to decide who got less or more screen time because this is ultimately the decision of the network and like the producer. He basically harassed Daniella for no reason. So now this is when things start to get really crazy. Paula, who's Guilherme's wife, now learns about the affair through Guilherme because he tells her for whatever reason, and she decides that the only way to fix their marriage and to fix the situation that Guilherme is in is to murder Daniella. So Paula, who is very upset about the fact that Guilherme's been cheating on her with his co-worker, she's pissed, right? So she decides that she's gonna come up with a plan for her and Guilherme to kill Daniella. While I understand learning that your husband cheating on you is very devastating and very upsetting, she should have just left him. She shouldn't have murdered his alleged mistress. Like, that's just crazy. You should never ever kill somebody because your partner was unfaithful. That just reflects on your partner. It should not be a reflection on anybody else. That's a reflection on your partner. Leave that person. She didn't make that decision. She decided that murder was just a better option. And so she devises a plan. And on the night of Daniella's murder, after a taping session of the show, Guilherme claims that he and Daniella had agreed to take a drive to a deserted beach together. So the fact that they were driving to a deserted beach together after a late night taping session actually led a lot of people to question whether or not they were actually having an affair. Because if you weren't having an affair, why would two married people, after a late night taping session, decide to drive to a deserted beach together? It is a little bit suspicious, but there are also people who believe that Guilherme was lying about that and they actually never went to the beach, or they never took a drive to the beach, and that Guilherme and Paula actually ambushed Daniella after she left the studio and was walking through the parking lot. And I think that that's likely the case. Let's go back to Guilherme's story about driving to the deserted beach together. And so Paula insists on coming along on the beach drive, and she actually hides herself in the backseat of the car. So later on, from the statement that Guilherme provides to the police about what happened to Daniella, Guilherme states that he and Daniella reached the beach, and then Paula jumps out of the back seat. There begins a very heated argument between the three of them. Guilherme says that the girls are in a very heated argument and Paula's trying to lunge at Daniella, so he grabs Daniella and he's trying to hold Paula back, but then somehow he trips and falls, and during the fall Daniella apparently hits her head on something very hard, probably like a rock or something on the floor, and becomes unconscious. So this leads Guilherme and Paula to believe that she is dead. He then claims that out of desperation he runs back to the car and tries to tape up his license plate number so that he can't be recognized, which, I don't know, sounds very suspicious. Because if it was an accident, why are you trying to hide anything? Why wouldn't you just call the police and try to get help? So this was already like a big red flag. He also claims that by the time he comes back to the area where Daniella was, he hears some sort of commotion and stumbles on Paula, basically stabbing Daniella with a pair of scissors. They both start freaking out because initially they started out as an accident and Daniella had died because she hit her head on something hard, but now it's turned out to just be murder because Paula stabs her 18 times. So Guilherme says he threw the scissors into the sea and then they leave Daniella in the abandoned parking lot near the beach and they just drive home. So this is when things start to get a little bit more interesting and a little bit more confusing. The next day after the murder, Guilherme goes to the police and he immediately confesses to the murder. But then after confessing to the murder, he quickly recants and then he puts the blame on Paula. Initially, when Guilherme went in to confess to the murder, Paula also did go in and confess that she had taken part in the murder as well. But after Guilherme recants the story, they both start to turn on one another and they put full blame on the other person. It did become unclear who exactly was fully responsible for the murder and whose idea the murder was. So eventually the prosecution does agree that both Guilherme and Paula were responsible for the murder of Daniella and that both were equally responsible for murdering her, and that her murder was a product of envy, jealousy, and ambition. They were only sentenced to 19 years in prison, but they only ended up serving 6. Guilherme and Paula did divorce while they were in prison, and when released, Guilherme actually became a pastor for a mega church. As for Paula, no one's really heard much about or from her, and it's unknown what she's been up to since her release. HBO Max did create a documentary about the life and murder of Daniella Perez. I think it's called The Brutal Pact. The Brutal Pact is on HBO Max, so if you have that streaming platform, definitely go check it out and let me know if you end up liking it. I myself have not watched it just because I don't have HBO Max here in Thailand. I think we have HBO Go, so I need to check if we have that as well. Yeah, let me know if it's good. The last thing I want to say about Guilherme is that he did pass away in November 2022, so just a few months ago. It's currently January 2nd, 2023 right now as I'm filming this. So yeah, he didn't pass away too long ago, and that basically sums up the story of Daniella Perez's tragic murder. It's really devastating how young she was when she died. She was 22 years old. She had her entire life ahead of her. The murder itself, it was just so meaningless. Like, it was just such a petty reason. That just makes it even more kind of depressing. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will hopefully be posting more videos in 2023 and hope that you guys will stick around and continue to watch and support my channel. Thank you so much, guys, and I really wish you an amazing 2023. I cannot wait to see you guys in my next video. Bye!